Well, hello there. I've been off the rails a bit covering the Skywalker saga and the piss that has become nearing its end. So, on to the second one of the 9 films. Let's have a little brief history of the Attack of Clones. Well, it's the sequel to the Phantom Menace, and this is, well, the tipping scale for the beginning of the famous Clone Wars. And one step to one of the best Star Wars shows. Honestly enough, might be a nitpick a bit, I'm not a big fan of the Attack of Clones name, given the title only really has meaning near the end. While titles like the Phantom Menace really was about the Phantom Menace throughout the film. A New Hope was in reference to Luke's journey to becoming a Jedi and defeating the tyrant known as the Empire. Like I said, it's more of a nitpick than an actual critique of its writing. So the Phantom Menace received, let's just say, not an overpraise, to put things lightly. Yep, assholes went beyond critiquing the characters and its writing and began sending horrible threats and comments to those involved on the project. Now why, you may say? Cause they're jackasses and a bunch of douchebags. George had every opportunity to reverse the effects and learn from his decision, and he very well did that. The politics seemed more interesting, less hollow, but the film has run into a new set of problems.
Unlike sand.
The film begins with the Trade Federation aligning themselves with Count Dooku and forming the Separatist Alliance. The Jedi are depleted in numbers and the Republic is in a vote to create a Republic army to repel the growing numbers from the Separatists. But one person seemed to have disagreed with this idea and, well, the man in charge plotting to overtake the Republic, he orders a long chain of assassination attempts to kill Padme. One of them being blowing up her ship, but failing to kill her as her double got the nasty end of the impact of the explosion. Just want to say the CGI somehow got worse from the Phantom Menace, not expecting a huge jump up from the Phantom Menace, but I wasn't expecting a downgrade from the effects. Also, given the fact George was trying to use CGI heavily in these films and trying new things he wasn't capable of during the 80s. The practical stuff does look cool. I wish the prequels, despite George's itch for computer technology, used more of those effects to allow for better immersion. Anyways, this whole assassination attempts and Padme and the growing numbers from the Separatist Alliance has Luke Palpatine and insists Obi-Wan and Anakin to guard her. He's sort of planting the seeds already and the manipulation strategy to the Chosen One to fall in love with the Senator of Naboo, given it'll cause a rift between the Jedi Order and his emotional attachment to Padme. Many years have gone by, a lot of the events have occurred in the 10-year span, and an eager Anakin can't wait to meet the Senator, but there's a little tension between him and Obi-Wan. Anakin believes the two should be looking for the assassin while trying to protect the Senator. Seems reasonable, while Obi-Wan simply wants to follow the orders from the Council has instructed to them. Anakin is having sleepless nights thinking about his mother and would rather dream about Padme. Obi-Wan argues his feelings should be kept in check, as she is a senator and resides herself in the political world. This should have been an immediate red flag for Obi-Wan to not keep Anakin close to Padme, given the Jedi Code mandates a Jedi shall not know anger, nor hatred, nor love. But I guess he let his own feelings get the best of him anyways. Now we arrive to the most infamous assassination attempt that has received criticism. Now I'm just gonna say, if you want the real culprit behind the whole scheme to stay hidden in the shadows, it's smart to create a chain, making it harder and prolonging the investigation while you work behind the scenes for a much greater plan. What's stupid is not using your ability to shapeshift to avoid any trouble and hide amongst the crowd, or walking up to the Jedi with a blaster when you could have simply shot him from a distance. And voila, it fails. Not only that, Jango uses a Kamino and Dart, the planet he's safe harboring on, but I guess the plot needed a way for Obi-Wan to locate the clone army. Bummer. Obi-Wan is having trouble finding the planet because Dooku deleted it from the archives until the time is right for them to find the planet.
Lost a planet, Master Obi-Wan has. How embarrassing. How embarrassing.
And despite Obi-Wan being very aware of Anakin having feelings for Padme, he agrees on sending him along with her alone on the planet. And yes, they make love while Obi-Wan sees the creation of the army and is impressed, but the red flags that the bounty hunter being the template and the convenient army the Republic have been targeting to find certainly has eluded the Jedi on its convenience and its connection to a hunter that's working for Darth Tyrannus. But to be fair, the Jedi are blinded because of the war. They'll take any help they can get and save as many Jedi as they can. Anakin and Padme fall in the most cheesy, cringe way possible. The clones prove to be useful, and Palpatine's plan is finally in motion.
Oh, not good.
Well, that was a lot to take in and a nice way to put things in a light manner. Interesting ideas, poor execution, which can explain the prequels in a nutshell. It's like George understood the criticisms from the Phantom Menace and mostly fixed those issues as I listed earlier. The wooden acting has somewhat improved, but also a lot of areas from George's directing that are known to be his weak side, or at least from his eyes, have become apparent. Too much, so little time. Movie is close to 2.5 hours. And from the Phantom Menace till now, we have an entirely new villain, narratives that are unexplained and are set up for a future successful show, new villains that have very minimal screen time but aren't explored as much, but possesses very interesting qualities. Count Dooku is the new main villain of this film. Or you could say a sub-villain for a much greater threat. Or a sub-villain for a much greater threat. A former Jedi that has left the Order and seen a new pathway to rid of the Jedi and the Republic, bring a new order to the galaxy, luring them to start the Clone Wars but failing to realize he's merely a pawn in all of it as well, just like many of Palpatine's apprentices before him. Dooku, a Jedi turned to the dark side just like Darth Vader, but the twist here is Dooku still has respect and admiration for his old friends. He even tries to spare Obi-Wan, who was the Padawan of his own Padawan once, or just like when he gave Windu a second chance and was hesitant to open fire on the Jedi. But a man with greater and horrific goals always gets the best of his good nature. Now that sounds very unique, but the problem is the film barely focuses on his character until like a good 2 minutes. Breaking down this character was benefited from the Clone Wars, which fleshed out a lot of characters from the prequels. Even Jango luckily wasn't Boba Fetted, as he plays a much bigger role, thankfully. But all we know about his character, well, he's a bounty hunter and he knows a man named Tyrannus, but dies getting his head chopped off in front of his son. Very brutal. They had a lot of emphasis around his character and we suspected he plays a bigger role until the film had to develop Dooku in a very short amount of time, who isn't clearly fleshed out himself. So yeah, not a lot that was going on for this character, but rather have this than, well, this. Too many narratives and is struggling to flesh out its own characters but giving hints on what the characters might be. Barely grasping conflicts and personality, it simply felt underwhelming. Stay on the topic of poor development, Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship. Now I'm fully aware the idea behind the prequel was to showcase the downfall of Anakin Skywalker and the factors which led to such a tragedy. The film depicts Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship, let's just say, complicated. Now, since these famous lines from A New Hope,
and he was a good friend.
Now it may just sound like a broken record, but the film really doesn't do Obi-Wan's statement justice. Throughout the film, we either see the two bickering, and not in the fun way, but more scolding than actual brotherly moments. They're either disagreeing, Anakin complaining about Obi-Wan, being jealous and holding him back, more complaining about Obi-Wan. We don't get moments where the two share their friendship as much, Obi-Wan teaching or being that friend or vice versa like Clone Wars explored, like Obi-Wan giving the advice when Anakin was going through a midlife crisis. Wish we got more of that, than the two yelling at one another. Luckily, Revenge of the Sith finally gave us those brotherly, lighthearted moments, and raising the emotional feel of the two clashing at the end of the film, tarnishing their long friendship, and why Vader barely had any hesitation to kill his arguably mentor and brother for so many years. Their conflict was simply Obi-Wan holding Anakin back, and Obi-Wan was being so stuck with the Jedi's morals and codes most of the time, like in the Clone Wars during the whole bounty hunter arc. Might cause a little bit of disagreement between the two, leading to their downfall. Clone Wars, whether it was the micro-series or canon, fleshed other aspects to the relationship, adding weight to what Obi-Wan meant when he was explaining to Luke how close the two were. I saved the best for last, or in this case the worst for last, and yeah, the love dialogue. Actually, the relationship between Anakin and Padme in general. This is where George took 2 steps backwards when all things were going simple and decent. This film simply exposed George's biggest weaknesses. 1. Dialogue, and 2. Ability to convey emotion. Padme plays a huge role into Anakin's descent to the dark side, exhibiting that Anakin can never let go of his feelings. He acts on emotional temp. So, how did George develop such a relationship? Anakin was already obsessed with Padme, while Padme just friend-zoned Anakin throughout the first half of the film and the Phantom Menace. But Anakin desperately tries to get her attention, so he eyes her, giving her the most creepiest smiles and many cringe lines, like this infamous line or this infamous scene. I've seen other films better execute such a type of relationship where the dude is trying to hook up with a chick. Now, it doesn't make the entertainment side of things awkward, but as an audience member, you can feel the awkward tension, making scenes bearable. Attack of the Clones, yes, the I don't like sand is in reference to the conversation they were having, but it's the line itself that just feels so out of place because of the editing. And then he begins to touch her, and at this point in the film, he's still in the friend zone, and she's called him out numerous times on his creepy moves like stare.
Please don't look at me like that.
it just doesn't work because there's no reaction from her right after, as they do kiss, but that's a complete instant regret from both, as they discuss that they can't be together. It's the choice of dialogue that makes the scene feel very cringe. George tried very hard to move away from the natural dialogue and taking this more Shakespeare route, a bit too much. No fault to Hayden and Natalie, it would be tough to act such lines given how the script illustrates the scene. Now it is a scene that does make sense given the position the two hold in the world. One is a sword-wielding monk while the other is a political idealist. And well, the execution here wasn't the best, but it's just my personal opinion on it. You may see it differently, I just don't think the dialogue really works in the scene. Now the reason Han and Leia worked, and yes, although Han wasn't separated from his emotions, the two are not so close in personalities, but they managed to work. Because Han's brash nature and Leia's calm kindness allow for both characters to piggyback off one another, making their relationship being more naturally developed and realistic. It wasn't cringe and it was interesting in some ways.
I love you.
Now, although, in my honest opinion, this is worst of the prequels, and I do have minor grudges like the final duel between Dooku and Yoda and Obi-Wan plus Anakin felt like a much downgraded version from a choreography and intensity perspective, the lack of music certainly doesn't do it justice, and the not enough time to develop Dooku as a character and his personality to really add substance to both duels. Yes, Maul was in the same boat, but he had the unique look and the anonymous feel to his character and the double-bladed fucking lightsaber to make Duel of Fates a much more fun and nice watch. Also, it's choreographed much better. Instead, we got CGI Dooku with CGI Yoda and a glow stick fight with barely seeing the glow sticks. I mean, the Yoda fight was alright. I know people don't like Yoda with the lightsaber. To me, it made sense given the lessons in Empire Strikes Back were a result of some of his mistakes in the prequels. And the Jedi were in a time when they became soldiers and less of peacekeepers. Honestly, the best scene in this entire film was Anakin crossing the twin suns to find his mother. It's beautifully shot. You can hear the Duel of Fates music really adds to the absolute intense situation Anakin is in, and once he finds his mother, you really understand his pain and suffering. For so many years, he was wondering what's happening with his mother during his time away from her, and when he finally meets her, she's dead. Now, the death itself could have been much better, but I love Hayden and Christensen's acting in this one. I think George executed this scene perfectly in my honest opinion. As for the other scenes, they're hit and miss. Film just had tremendous potential. Love the concept, the world building. It tried telling a very unique story, but execution is always the final result, and it was disappointing. George just exposed many of his weaknesses and sometimes the creativity going way too above than he should or at the wrong time, like not allowing scenes to flow naturally and taking its time. He really spins through a lot of the plot details and it's kind of hard to catch sometimes, or it doesn't give you enough time to react to the scene, or creating more subplots that don't really have a conclusion to them. They just feel like more like a setup, let's say, for the Clone Wars show, or a book, or anything else. The biggest problem in Star Wars, in my honest opinion. Like the Sifo Dyas plotline was never revisited in this trilogy, given its significant importance to the story. The Clone Wars had to conclude that huge line. DLC content, the biggest problem, like I said. The first two acts were just a pain to get through, with very few moments that felt earned and engrossing. But George has insane world building that I immensely respect. I haven't seen nothing like it, but even his own creativity gets the best of him. Lucky improves 10 times making Revenge of the Sith, but it's not a masterpiece like many claim it to be, but it's just a more tolerable prequel that is actually really good. The best way I can describe this film is that it had the most potential that immediately fell short. 7 more to go, so yeah, see ya.